Revenge Story with Anjo.
Clara Bennett was 62 and had spent more than 20 years working as a senior executive at Lynx Technologies, a major software firm in Atlanta. To her neighbors in Building C, she was just the quiet woman who drove an old blue Honda, smiled politely, and carried her own groceries. They saw modesty and assumed struggle. What they never saw were the multi-million-dollar contracts that carried her signature or the departments that moved because of her quiet decisions. Clara had learned long ago that peace was richer than attention. Her son, Malik, didn't know every detail of her job. He knew she worked in an office and lived comfortably, and that was enough. She had never bragged, never shown him boardrooms or bonuses. She wanted him grounded, not dazzled by money. When Malik married Ava Carter 3 years earlier, Clara smiled through the wedding, proud yet cautious. Ava was graceful, educated, and came from one of those families that carried money like perfume, unspoken but always sensed. The Carters were Atlanta's old money, charity galas, designer brunches, and polite gossip disguised as compliments. Clara had known her plainness would eventually be discussed. That day came one quiet Tuesday evening. She was finishing a quarterly report when her phone buzzed. Malik's voice sounded rehearsed, almost nervous. "Hey, Mom," he said. "Ava's parents are visiting from New York this weekend. They'd love to meet you. We're having dinner at Lumiere downtown, Saturday at 7. Clara smiled. "Do they know much about me?" she asked. There was a pause. "I told them you work in an office and that you like simple things." "Simple," Clara repeated softly after he hung up. The word lingered in her apartment long after the call ended. She wasn't angry, just thoughtful. Her son had been raised to value humility, yet he was afraid she might embarrass him. As rain began tapping her window, she made a quiet decision. She would meet them exactly as they imagined her. Plain, ordinary, invisible. But this time, invisibility would be her armor, not her shame. Saturday came draped in drizzle. Clara woke early, brewed coffee, and stood in front of her closet. On one side hung neat power suits, on the other, simple dresses worn soft by years. She reached for a navy blue one, faded but honest. She tied her silver-streaked hair back, looked in the mirror, and smiled faintly. The reflection wasn't the woman who led 5 regional teams. It was the mother who had learned grace through storms. The drive downtown was slow, city lights shimmering through rain. The cab driver, an older black man humming to Al Green, asked, "Meeting someone special tonight, ma'am?" Clara smiled. You could say that. Lumiere was alive with chatter and polished laughter when she arrived. Wine glasses clinked under chandeliers, and waiters glided between tables like dancers. Malik stood near the entrance, adjusting his jacket. His smile was warm but tight. "Mom, you look nice," he said, his voice just a touch formal. Ava greeted her with a light hug. "So good to see you, Mrs. Bennett." Then came Denise and Thomas Carter, grace wrapped in wealth. Denise wore a pearl gray suit that shimmered under the golden lights, and Thomas's blazer looked like it had been ironed by heaven itself. Denise extended her manicured hand. "It's such a pleasure to finally meet you," she said. "Ava tells us you live quite simply." Clara smiled. Simplicity keeps life peaceful. Dinner began with charm. The Carters talked about their Hamptons home, their art donations, their dear friend on the governor's board. Clara listened, nodded politely, and kept her voice calm. Then the questions came, sweetened but sharp. "Do you manage your bills alone?" Denise asked, feigning concern. "It must be hard," Thomas added. "You've done well to get by." Clara smiled gently. "It's not difficult when you love your work." Denise leaned forward, her tone syrupy. "Malik has such a generous heart. If you ever need help, we'd be happy to send a little something each month. Maybe $700? Just to make things easier." Clara's fork paused midair. "700, she repeated softly. "How thoughtful." Silence rippled across the table. Malik's face tightened. Ava looked down, embarrassed. Thomas smiled, as if he had just solved poverty. Clara tilted her head. "Out of curiosity," she asked lightly, "how much did you contribute toward Malik and Ava's home?" Denise blinked, caught off guard. Oh, about 40,000 for the down payment, 15 for their honeymoon. Paris, of course. Clara nodded. 55,000, she murmured. That's about what I make in a month. Thomas frowned. I'm sorry, did you say a month? Clara smiled kindly. Yes. I'm regional director at Lynx Technologies. I oversee operations across 5 states. We've had a strong quarter. Denise's hand trembled around her wine glass. Ava's mouth fell open slightly. Malik looked at his mother in disbelief. You didn't lie, Clara said softly, turning to her son. You just forgot that simplicity isn't the same as lack. She reached into her purse, drew out her black corporate card, and placed it neatly on the table. Dinner's on me, she said. Consider it a courtesy from the woman you thought needed your charity. The waiter appeared, sensing tension. We'll take the check now, Clara said calmly. No one spoke. Denise's lips parted, but no sound came. Thomas cleared his throat. Malik stared at the tablecloth. Ava sat frozen, shame flickering behind her mascaraed eyes. Outside, the rain had eased into a soft mist. Clara stepped into the night, the air cool against her face. She hadn't raised her voice or tried to humiliate anyone. Truth had done all the work. A valet hurried over with an umbrella. Need a cab, ma'am? Yes, thank you. In the back seat, Clara watched the lights of downtown blur into streaks of gold and blue. The driver glanced at her through the mirror. You look like you just won a quiet war, he said with a chuckle. Clara smiled faintly. Maybe I did. Family, he guessed. She nodded. Something like that. He laughed. Well, ma'am, peace looks good on you. Clara turned to the window. It feels even better, she said. When she got home, the stillness wrapped around her like comfort. She changed into her robe, made tea, and sat by the window, watching the last drops of rain trace the glass. For the first time in years, she felt light. Peace, she whispered, the one wealth no one can buy. The next morning, sunlight poured through her blinds. She sipped coffee as the city hummed below. Her phone buzzed. Malik. She hesitated, then answered. Mom, he said, his tone heavy. I'm so sorry about last night. Clara didn't reply. They try to justify themselves, he continued, but I told them who you really are, what you've built. They were stunned. Still, Clara said nothing, letting him find his own words. I wasn't embarrassed by you, Mom, he said finally. I was embarrassed by myself for forgetting where I come from. Clara's voice softened. We all forget, Malik. What matters is remembering again. He exhaled shakily. Ava cried. She said she didn't realize how much she sounded like her mother. She wants to come by to apologize. Clara looked out the window. Apologies are easy, she said. Change takes courage. I know, he replied quietly. But she means it. And I want to do better, too. Clara smiled faintly. Then start by being honest with yourself and with her. When the call ended, she sat in silence, feeling both sadness and pride. Her son was learning. That was enough. 3 days later, a soft knock echoed through her apartment. When Clara opened the door, Ava stood there holding a small bouquet of daisies. No designer outfit, no makeup, just jeans and a beige sweater. Mrs. Bennett, she said softly. May I come in? Clara stepped aside. Of course. Photo of Malik as a boy. The faint smell of cinnamon. It's beautiful here, she said. Peaceful. That's what I like about it, Clara replied. Ava placed the daisies on the counter. Her voice trembled. I came to apologize for how I treated you and for what I let my parents say. I grew up thinking money defined respect. I was wrong. Clara studied Ava quietly. It's not easy to unlearn what you were taught, she said. But it's brave to start. Ava nodded, eyes glistening. I want to change. I don't want Malik to be ashamed of kindness or of simplicity. Clara smiled gently. Then begin by listening more than you speak. Value people for who they are, not what they own. The rest will follow. Ava's lips trembled. I see now why he loves visiting you. This place, it feels safe. Clara's smile warmed. Peace has that effect. For a long moment, they sat in silence. It wasn't awkward. It was healing. When Ava stood to leave, she hesitated. Mrs. Bennett, I hope one day you'll forgive me. Clara reached for her hand. Forgiveness doesn't need time. Only understanding. You already have it. Ava's tears fell then, quiet and sincere. She hugged Clara tightly before walking out into the soft drizzle. Clara watched her go, the door clicking shut behind her. Maybe tonight, she whispered to herself, I wasn't the only one who found peace. That night, Clara slept deeply for the first time in months. No dreams, no worries, just rest that felt earned. Weeks passed, and life returned to its gentle rhythm. Malik and Ava began visiting every Sunday, sometimes with groceries, sometimes with laughter. There were no more guarded conversations, no performance of perfection, just family. Ava had changed more than Clara expected. She stopped chasing appearances. She started talking about her job, her mistakes, her hopes. Each time she laughed, it sounded freer. Malik often watched her with quiet pride. One Sunday, as sunlight poured through the kitchen window, Ava said, You know, Mrs. Bennett, I used to think happiness was expensive. Clara chuckled softly. And now? Ava smiled. Now I think it's quiet. Clara nodded, stirring the soup they were cooking together. Peace is the one luxury most people can't afford, because they don't realize it's free. Malik walked in carrying fresh bread from the bakery. You two sound like philosophers, he teased. Just women who've learned a few lessons, Clara said. They all laughed, a sound that filled the apartment like sunlight. After lunch, they sat by the window watching the rain begin again, the air thick with comfort and gratitude. Ava reached for Clara's hand. Thank you, she said softly, for not giving up on me. Clara squeezed her hand. We all stumble when we confuse wealth with worth. What matters is learning to stand again. That evening, Malik hugged his mother tightly. Mom, I used to think your silence meant you didn't care. Now I know it meant you were stronger than all of us. Clara smiled faintly. Silence isn't weakness, son. It's power under control. When they left, the apartment grew quiet again, but this time it didn't feel empty. It felt whole. Later, as she sat writing in her small journal, Clara reflected on the journey that had unfolded. Sometimes the truth doesn't destroy, it rebuilds. Sometimes humility is the loudest victory. Months passed. At work, Clara found new purpose mentoring younger women. Every Wednesday evening, she gathered a small group, single mothers, recent graduates, women overlooked by louder voices. They met in a modest conference room after hours. One evening, a young woman named Grace asked, Mrs. Bennett, how did you stay strong when people underestimated you? Clara smiled thoughtfully. By remembering that what others think of you says more about them than about you. And by never confusing wealth with worth. The room went quiet as the women absorbed her words. After the session ended, Grace lingered by the door. Thank you, she said softly. You make me believe that quiet people can still win. Clara smiled. Quiet doesn't mean small, Grace. Sometimes it's just peace refusing to shout. When everyone left, Clara stayed behind for a while. Through the window, Atlanta shimmered under the soft glow of streetlights. Cars traced ribbons of light across the freeway, each one carrying its own story, its own lesson. Clara felt a deep sense of belonging, to herself, to her truth, to her peace. That night, she brewed tea and opened her journal again. On a fresh page, she wrote, Real power doesn't need noise. It stands steady when others perform. It listens when others boast. And it forgives when others don't understand. She paused, reading the words twice before closing the book. Her apartment was small, but it glowed with warmth. On the windowsill sat the fading bouquet of daisies Ava had brought. They were drying, but still beautiful, like grace that lingers. The following Sunday, Malik brought a surprise. Mom, I want you to meet someone, he said, stepping aside as a nervous young woman entered. This is Nia, he said proudly. She's interning at Lynx. She reminds me of you. Quiet but sharp. Clara extended her hand. Welcome, Nia. Sit down. As they talked, Clara realized Malik wasn't just proud. He was evolving. He spoke with humility now, not ego. Watching him filled her with quiet joy. He was growing into the kind of man she had hoped to raise. Kind, steady, aware. Over dinner, Nia mentioned she'd seen Clara's name on several executive reports. "You're that Clara Bennett?" she asked, eyes wide. Clara laughed softly. "Just Clara," she said. "Titles don't cook dinner." They all laughed, and Malik squeezed his mother's shoulder affectionately. "See why I brag about her now," he said. Clara smiled, shaking her head. "You should brag about what matters, Malik. Kindness, honesty, and peace." Ava nodded. "Those are harder." Ava nodded. "Those are harder to earn than money." As the night ended, Clara walked Nia to the door. "Never let the world make you feel small for being calm," she said. "Still waters run deep." Nia smiled shyly. "I'll remember that." When they left, Clara turned off the lights and stood by the window again. The skyline shimmered like a promise. Somewhere beneath it, her son's life, her daughter-in-law's change, and her men's dreams were all unfolding. The peace she had found had quietly spread to others. A few weeks later, Clara received an email from corporate headquarters. They wanted her to lead a new mentorship division across the company. The message ended with, "We believe your leadership style reflects the kind of strength the world needs right now." Clara smiled. She didn't need titles anymore, but this one felt right. She accepted. That evening, she called Malik. "I'm taking on something new," she said. He beamed through the phone. "You never stop inspiring me, Mom." Clara chuckled. Inspiration is just experience written softly. The next Wednesday, she stood before a larger crowd of women than ever before. Some wore suits. Others came straight from work in scrubs. Clara began with a story, not about success, but about humility. "There will be people who look at your quietness and mistake it for weakness," she said. "Don't fight to prove them wrong. Just live so your peace speaks louder than their noise." The room erupted in nods and murmurs. Some women wiped tears from their cheeks. Grace smiled proudly from the front row. Afterward, one woman approached Clara in tears. "Ma'am, I used to think silence meant surrender. Tonight I realized it can mean strength." Clara hugged her. "It always has, dear. You just needed to see it in yourself." As she left the building that night, Clara felt the cool air brush her face. The city's rhythm pulsed softly around her. Life had come full circle, from being misunderstood to becoming the quiet teacher others needed. Back home, Clara found Malik waiting outside her door, holding dinner bags. "Surprise visit," he grinned. She laughed. "At my age, surprises make my heart jump." He stepped in, setting the food down. "I heard about the new position. I'm proud of you." Clara smiled. "You should be proud of yourself too, son." They sat eating together, laughter mixing with the aroma of fried chicken. "You know, Mom," Malik said, "when I was younger, I thought success looked like loud people in suits. Now I see it looks like peace in your kitchen." Clara chuckled. "Peace wears an apron more often than a tie." They both laughed. After dinner, Malik helped her wash dishes, something he hadn't done since he was a teen. "You're quieter these days," she said softly. He nodded. "Because I finally understand what you meant when you said, 'Don't prove yourself, live yourself.'" Clara touched his arm. "That's all I ever wanted for you." When he left later that night, she watched him go with the kind of pride that doesn't need words. One weekend, Ava joined Clara for a neighborhood women's brunch. As they walked in, a few of Clara's neighbors whispered, "That's Mrs. Bennett's daughter-in-law, the fancy one." Ava smiled, unfazed. "They're sweet," she whispered. Clara laughed. "Growth looks good on you." During the brunch, Ava shared how she'd started volunteering at a local youth center. "You inspired me," she told Clara. "Not just to change how I think, but to use what I have for something good." Clara beamed. "That's all any of us can do, turn what once hurt us into something healing." As the months rolled on, Clara continued mentoring, teaching, and loving quietly. The daisies from Ava had long since dried, but she kept them in a small vase on her kitchen counter. They reminded her that grace, once given, keeps growing. Sometimes she'd get messages from former ments, women who had started businesses, gone back to school, or simply found peace. Each message ended the same way: "Thank you for believing in me." Clara would smile, whispering to herself, "You did all the believing. I just reminded you it was possible." One evening, Clara received a call from Ava. "Mrs. Bennett," she said softly, "my mom wants to see you." Clara raised an eyebrow. "Denise?" "Yes," Ava said nervously. "She's changed. Or trying to." Clara hesitated but agreed. A week later, they met at a small cafe. Denise looked older, softer somehow. "I came to apologize," she said quietly. "I misjudged you. I let pride make me cruel." Clara sipped her tea. Pride blinds the best of us. But seeing again, that's the real strength. Denise nodded, tears in her eyes. "You handled me with more grace than I deserved. That night at dinner, you didn't humiliate me. You taught me." Clara smiled gently. "We all learn when life humbles us." They talked for an hour, not as rivals, but as two women finally seeing each other. When they parted, Denise hugged her sincerely. Clara walked away feeling lighter, as if a final chapter had closed itself. That night, Clara wrote in her journal again. Some lessons echo beyond the moment. Dignity doesn't shout. It whispers and still shakes walls. She looked around her apartment. It wasn't large, but it was full of peace, of love, of the kind of wealth that doesn't need to be counted. She smiled, thinking of her son, Ava, her ments, and even Denise. The next morning, she stood by her window watching the city wake. People hurried to work, carrying coffee cups and dreams. Clara whispered, "Money fades. Dignity doesn't." Her reflection smiled back, silver hair, gentle eyes, and the unshakable calm of someone who had learned her worth without needing to prove it. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, Clara brewed her last cup of tea for the day. The air smelled of rain and jasmine. She sat in her chair, closed her eyes, and whispered, "Peace, that's the wealth I'll leave behind." Down below, the city pulsed with life, unaware of the quiet woman in Building C who had once been underestimated but had become something greater, a living lesson. And for the first time in her long life, Clara Bennett didn't just feel rich. She was rich, in grace, in truth, and in peace.